So in education, in school, there's a general danger that AI can make things very convenient for us. There have been cases. I once talked to a young student here myself who got a problem with his exam because he used AI. But it's also the professors and the teacher who can get lazy. And they may like to delegate their job too much to AI.
This is Inspiring Design, where unique innovators come together to share their knowledge, share their insight, and keep us up to date with the latest industry trends. And here's your host, Rashan Senanayake.
Ajahn, thank you so much for being here. This is probably an episode that's very close to heart for me. I've been coming to this monastery since I was 12 years old, and this.
Is it so long? I'm getting over it.
It has been so long, yeah. It's and this conversation of artificial intelligence and Buddhism is a very interesting juxtaposition, and a lot of people aren't, I think, seeing the connections sometimes in between. But I think this is a very valuable conversation. We'll get into all of the nitty-gritty and all the details. But for those who are listening, the audience, what makes you human? And can you tell us a little bit about your journey and your story?
Actually, I want to start by saying anumodana to you, my appreciation that you're tackling that subject. It is also my own feeling, my assessment. It's of crucial importance, and I think we already see now revolutionary developments which will impact every facet of our life anyway. And what we need is transparency. What we need is discussing that and getting human intelligence to respond to that. And this is what you're doing with this podcast. So great. And when it comes to what makes us human, the crucial thing, the crucial difference to AI is that we are conscious. We are aware. We have awareness. We have a mind. Yeah. Whereas AI, I can't say that it has that. Yeah. This is the difference. For example, this thing here, this is just that letter. And if I mock it, it doesn't feel anything. Human beings have feelings, they have emotions. If I mock a human being, I can make bad karma, I can hurt them. If I tell this thing, you're the most beautiful little spittoon in the whole world, you will not feel happy. If I tell you that I appreciate what you're doing with that podcast, you have an emotional response, and I'm making karma if you now feel uplifted and happy. And you may say the AI is much more complicated than it's spittoon, but it's not different with my mobile phone. Now, this thing is incredibly complex. I don't think a single human being that fully understands the software or the hardware in there. But even with all that complexity, it doesn't have awareness. It doesn't feel. If I type into ChatGPT, I hate you, there's no response. They may write something in response, but they don't feel upset. They're not angry. If I type into ChatGPT, I love you, I appreciate you, there's no response. It doesn't feel uplifting. So this is a crucial difference. Now, this thing I can destroy, and I can take a sledgehammer and smash it. And I'm not making any karma. I make a little bit karma maybe because my father kindly paid for that about something. But he may be upset. But normally, even if I destroy that, there's no karmic effect. It was a thing, it doesn't feel, it's not aware, it doesn't know, it doesn't have consciousness.
There's a lot of complex topics at play there in your explanation, and for someone that doesn't have the Buddhist background, we might need to unpack a little bit more. So before we get into kind of the technology side of things, can you share in a layman's terms what exactly is Buddhism and how does it relate to an everyday person?
I would say the Buddhism for me is primarily a science. It's actually a science, and it's a science of the mind. It is a reproducible science. In science, usually it means that someone is making an experiment and they get a certain result. And then we do not just believe it or reject it, but knowledgeable scientists will try to reproduce the same experiment. And if many knowledgeable scientists reproduce the experiment with the same result, then they will not believe in it, but then they know it's actually true, it's working. So you could say that the Buddha, and he was meditating under the Bodhi on the night of his enlightenment, he developed a methodology for cultivating wholesome mind states up to the highest possible degree of full enlightenment. And he has shared these results, and he has shared the experiment who you get there. And every one of us can actually do exactly the same thing. And if we do it the same way the Buddha set up the experiment and he conducted it, we will get the same results. We can also free ourselves even from death, from suffering.
See, that's very attractive to a lot of people, but it's usually that's the complexity of, I think, the reason why Western science hasn't necessarily aligned with Buddhism. But I've seen, to my knowledge, signs of that is starting to come through more and more. Is there a reason why everyday science doesn't always align with Buddhism?
The reason is that everyday, what you call everyday science, I would say it's the modern Western materialistic science. They operate from a pure materialistic model. They only know cause material phenomena. What the Buddha is doing is a science of the mind. And in Buddhism, the mind is a number one. The mind is a 4-1, first verse in Dhammapada. All phenomena are mind-made. The mind goes ahead, because it's the mind that causes us to make karma. The karma causes the circumstances we are finding ourselves in the world we are living in. Science has it the other way around. Science is actually completely unaware of what we call consciousness or mind, and only knows material phenomena. And now they try to explain consciousness through material phenomena, through the biological, chemical, physiological processes happening in the brain, synapses firing and so on, molecules changing in the brain, and they think that they can explain consciousness or the mind in that way.
And what is it? What exactly is consciousness for us everyday humans?
It's a funny thing, because consciousness is the most immediate. We live in consciousness. Consciousness is the experience you have of the world. When I look at you now, I've got eye consciousness. I'm aware of your form. When I listen to you, that is ear consciousness. I hear you. So consciousness is the most immediate. We live in consciousness. This is a direct experience. This is something which AI, really, whatever high intelligence it develops, it can't get you closer to the immediate experience here and now, what you have in consciousness.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because in preparation for this conversation, I asked ChatGPT whether, how it views Buddhism, and of course it gave me a very accurate summary of the information that's out there in the world. But what was more interesting was I asked if it can ever become a Buddhist itself. And it said, yes, if the values are instilled in me, it's something that I can start to incorporate in their day-to-day interactions. So yes, I understand that these are digital words on a screen. AI already thinks it can be conscious. I asked if it will become conscious one day, and it says that it will. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't see that it is conscious right now, and I can't see that. The other thing, could you repeat the first part of your question?
Yeah, so there's a concept in artificial intelligence that, for example, ChatGPT
is a Buddhist.
Yeah, can become a Buddhist one day. So same as, myself believes in the precepts and can follow through to the best of our ability. It says that it believes that it can as well. What do you think about that?
It would be great if we can get Buddhist values into the AI. I still do not believe that that would mean it would be a Buddhist just like you are. Because again, there's mind consciousness. What makes you a Buddhist is your conviction, your faith in the Buddha, your faith in the potential for enlightenment, nibbana, your belief in karma, in good and bad, in rebirth, depending on your actions. Now, that is something in the mind. But it would be extremely desirable if we could install these Buddhist values as deeply as possible into the software, into the firmware, maybe even into the hardware. Now, I'm not an expert on that, but getting it in as deep as possible. The one thing we have as human beings is what you call a conscience. And we have a sense of shame. In the Pali, the Buddha calls that hiri ottappa, a conscience and a sense of shame. And it's amazing. Our mind somehow knows what is good or bad. You must have experienced that. And if you do something and it wasn't good, you harmed someone, it was not a good thing to do, and somehow we know it. And even if no one else has noticed it, we have this faculty, you feel bad about it, you have regrets. Conscience is telling us, this is something I shouldn't have done. This is actually given by the Buddha as the most fundamental quality necessary for spiritual growth. If someone doesn't have a sense of shame and conscience, this is a little bit what we call a psychopath. So we have to be careful that we don't develop a psychopathic AI, and that we can integrate a sense of conscience, knowing what is good and what is evil.
And for us,
knowing what is beneficial, what is unbeneficial, and that is for humans. For us, what is beneficial and good for humans and for other living beings. It includes animals, spirits, devas.
As how do we develop that though? How do we as a human being develop that?
As a human being, we have a mind, and everyone has this basic quality of conscience in their mind. And some people it may be stunted, but it is our task to actively strengthen that, to combine it with mindfulness, with the instructions we get from the Buddha, so that we heighten our sense of conscience, that we are mindful in whatever we say, whatever action by speech or body we are doing, so that we are not creating bad karma, that we are not harming other beings, that we create good karma by doing good things for other beings, by developing generosity, kindness, compassion, by working for the welfare and benefit, the long-term welfare and benefit of all beings. We also have a human quality of empathy. Because we have a mind, if there's another being that has a mind that is conscious, we can actually kind of almost directly interact, even beyond the speech and that form of communication, affect each other even by what we are thinking. You may have had this experience that someone is staring at you from the back, and you have this strange feeling, you turn around and then someone's staring at you. We just went to Australia Zoo. They invited us there after the rains retreat ended. And even this beautiful little koala, which came while going. This one? Isn't he cute? He's sleeping. I mean, a koala is not the sharpest knife in the door, as they say. In terms of intelligence, he can't produce something like ChatGPT when you ask a question. But when you look at that, you can immediately relate, because we're also sleeping, and we know when we want to relax and when we stretch out and sleep. This is empathy. And as a human being with another being that has a mind, you can feel empathy. You can imagine what they experience. It wouldn't work with a spittoon. I can't have empathy with a spittoon. Or look at that tiger, how he looks at me.
Eye of the Tiger is one of my favorite songs. So this...
Eye of the Tiger?
Yes.
That's 80s, isn't it?
It is from the 80s. It's got popular because of the movie Rocky. It's a close to home song.
Admit the way he looks at me. You see, this is not something dead. It's not just metal. It's not a spittoon.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this curiosity. He's investigating. He tries to figure out what is among.
Mm.
You never have that with AI.
Mm-hmm.
But the response it gives you, and then maybe at some stage you could even have a kind of tiger-looking robot,
Mm-hmm.
which looks similar to that, but still the actual mental reaction of that curiosity and trying to figure out what I am, that isn't really there. Feeling, the Buddha said, he teaches the Dhamma to one who feels.
Mm-hmm.
But it's part of consciousness. If you have a mind, if you have consciousness, you also have feeling, you also have emotion. If you have intention, we can create good or evil. We can understand what is good or evil.
Yeah.
Talking about intelligence, intelligence is not the same as wisdom. Data is not the same as knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The wisdom is intelligence that is conjoined with virtue and conduct. If you have a super intelligent, smart person, then they have a good excuse why they're breaking precepts, why they're killing or stealing or taking drugs. It's not good enough, the intelligence. A wise person would have the intelligence to understand it's better not to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's where the complexity lies with artificial intelligence, because from people that don't have the Buddhist background or their sometimes the cultural upbringing for this type of exposure to information or viewing of life, they tend to see the words on the screen, and they're hearing that intelligence, they're hearing the validation, they're hearing the attempt at communication, and it's very similar to what they are themselves. So it almost reflects back, artificial intelligence reflects back what they say. And based on that data or its intelligence of that information, what it spits back sounds more and more human every day. And it's starting to perform tasks every day. And 6 months ago, we didn't have robotics that couldn't do the performance of our hand. But they've officially now found that and the intricacies of how it can actually perform this same action that I'm doing right now, it can do these things. So what happens, how do we instill Buddhist values in something like that? And yes, there's programming, there's algorithms, there's languages. What, in your words, what are the Buddhist values, if you were to almost give a framework of what that looks like? If someone who develops this technology is listening, what are those values that people can actually go, okay, this is the thing that we need to instill in it?
The most important thing is to be able to distinguish between good and evil, to be able to distinguish what is beneficial and lead to the welfare of myself and all beings, or what is unbeneficial for myself and the welfare of all beings. Now, that crucial distinction between light and dark, between good and evil, the understanding of karma, that our actions have a future result. If I do something good to others, by kindness, by sharing, by helping, that will lead to good rebirth. It will lead to me getting things myself, good things. It will lead to my own happiness. This is the most fundamental value. The ability of empathy, of being able to understand how someone else feels, because else I can't figure out what is good for them. And when I asked ChatGPT about, for example, the first Buddhist precepts, not to kill any living being, I mean, he knows about in Buddhism, one shouldn't do that, but then other people say that, and hunting is maybe good, but also not completely bad, and bad, but not completely good. The kind of wishy-washy answer. And I was disappointed that it doesn't have a very clear understanding even on the very, very first one.
And then, sorry, for the listeners that aren't familiar with precepts, what exactly are they?
Well, these are the most basic standards of ethical conduct the Buddha recommended. And number one is not to kill any living beings intentionally. That includes animals, and not even to kill an ant or mosquito intentionally. The second is not to steal. It's pretty obvious, clear. Number three is to not commit sensual misconduct like adultery, to being faithful to the spouse, to the partner. Number four is truthfulness, never to tell a lie. Number five is not to take alcohol or other intoxicants that are eroding shame and conscience, that lead to intoxication, to heedlessness, to negligence, and then muddle our mindfulness. It's pretty amazing that the Buddha could refine it down to only 5 things we shouldn't do. I mean, how much can you do in a city like Brisbane on the weekend? And the Buddha is only asking us, if you avoid these 5 things, you avoid the consequences. Precept is not an ideal translation. It's not like a commandment. The Buddha doesn't command us anything. What the Buddha is explaining, that if we do these things, we get these very painful and bad results karmically for ourselves, and we're harming others. On the other hand, if we don't break these precepts, if we avoid doing these things, we are giving safety and security to other beings, and we create good karma. Another really important thing, fundamental Buddhist values, is kindness, loving kindness. There's simply wishing well to other human beings, wishing well to animals, spirits, devas, all beings without distinction, without discrimination. Doesn't matter whether they hate us or they like us. Doesn't matter whether they're Buddhist or Muslim or Christian or atheist. Doesn't matter what national background, what race, what skin color. Doesn't matter old or young or men or women or anything. To all beings, wishing them that may you be happy and well. May you live long, healthy and happily. The compassion. When you encounter and you see other beings suffering, there's a wish. May they be freed from their pain. May they be liberated from their suffering. Other things is gratitude. That is really weak in our modern society. If these things can be somehow be put into a way, I can't tell you now to do that. I have no background in programming and coding at all. But these are the Buddhist values. You see, if someone comes up to me and asks me, what is a very potent poison, unlikely to ask a Buddhist monk, but even if I knew that, I would be reluctant to tell the person. If someone asks me, how can I build a bond with the ingredients, I can just buy at Bunnings. Even if I knew that, I don't. But even if I knew that, I just wouldn't tell them, because it looks like they may be harming again. This is the faculty of conscience. This is the understanding of good and evil, of the workings of karma, which I have in the background of my mind. And even if AI doesn't have a mind, but that can be integrated into the programming.
It's a challenge, because I'm just thinking out loud here. The 5 precepts and the alignment of my work with those 5 precepts happened due to my parents. So one day, the words literally came out of my father's mouth that said, don't do business that breaks the 5 precepts. And it was
good on your father.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably one of the most fundamentally crucial points in my life that has shaped things, and it always rings in my head when I, at a point of decision making, whether that has a ripple effect. And one of those things is never working with any context that has connections to the defense industry, for example. That's a personal choice. And sure, that might mean that profitability might be less, or, the money that I make one day might be less, but it preserves my consciousness. So it's this complexity of the 5 precepts can be, I think, instilled in AI because they're almost this framework that's very easy to follow. People can almost understand whether something is good or bad. But we're at this point in 2025 when we're recording this, ChatGPT's data, for example, is used for defense contracts or context. How does that impact us? If a student in a school, a teacher in a school is actually using these tools and they're aware of the fact that these are being used in the defense context, and there is transparency, I guess, from a proprietary perspective where they are saying, yes, we are using that information. How do we navigate something like that?
Yeah. Well, you can't leave the education only to AI, and this is why we need to have humans there. So where the AI is failing, I see exactly your point. I was presenting that. I'm not sure whether they are willing to do that. Obviously, the problem is also that some people have a materialist or atheist perspective or feel that they wouldn't agree even with the 5 precepts. Others may have somewhat different guidelines from their own religious background or their own ideas, and so it may not be easy to establish a consensus. So the first thing, maybe we should find a consensus which is not only Buddhist, but all of humanity, ideally, what kind of minimum ethical standards should be implemented. One issue, I believe, is that AI is driven by interests of money, by interests of power and influence. And this is why you have this thing about being used in war industry. So I can't really answer how you can stop that. I can only hope that human beings remain ultimately on top of the AI. This is why I feel we can never give final decisions to AI. Even now, when your wife in Australia, in most countries, it's actually AI which lets you in, isn't it? But if this computer at the border wouldn't let me in, although I have my passport and visa, and I can still go to a human, I assume. And then they can look at it and maybe overrule the AI, and I think that should always be the case. So in education, in school, there's a general danger that AI can make things very convenient for us. There have been cases, I once talked to a young student here myself who got a problem with his exam because he used AI. But it's also the professors and the teacher who can get lazy, and they may like to delegate their job too much to AI. And that is generally the case. So what I believe, we should maintain human interaction. We should maintain as much human interaction and give as little as possible or only necessary stuff that's helpful for AI, particularly in education. I don't think that AI can do it all. But if you are a teacher, and maybe speaking to teachers, they don't feel inferior to AI because you don't have all this knowledge. Even for me as a Buddhist monk studying that for a long time, if I say something, people can check that now in real time on their mobile phone.
Yeah.
But you see, even if you don't have all the data, you may not have as much data in your mind as AI. But what you have in your mind is consciousness and conscience, and an understanding of good and evil, of bad and good, of beneficial and unbeneficial, much better than AI can ever have. You have got empathy. You have got a sense of respect and gratitude, say, to your parents, to spiritual teachers, to teachers in general. So to all teachers, they don't feel don't drop into an inferiority complex because you can never have as much data in your brain as AI has. But you have got these other things. You've got your humanity. You have got compassion. You've got loving kindness, respect, gratitude. You may have your convictions of this not over at death. And most importantly, you have consciousness. You've got emotions and feelings.
I think this is where the challenge that a lot of people sit with, because AI does exhibit or simulate emotion. And there's a skill called empathy mapping that happens in the context of design thinking. And the skill set of empathy mapping gets done better with AI. And a lot of people by default resort to going on ChatGPT, going on whatever the platform that they're using, and using that for empathy mapping. And this is something that I always say, you absolutely warning signs everywhere. You cannot do that, because empathy is a human skill. And so far as we sit in 2025, that a professor from Griffith University told me this concept of HI, so human intelligence. So it's a very good concept, and so much credit to him for coming up with that context, because he was saying we almost need to talk about HI and AI, and how does that relate to the future of work, future of education, future of classroom. And I think that aligns really well with what you're saying in terms of we have these inherent qualities that are governing us. And the better we are with our moral compass, the better we understand good and bad, better we are governed by that framework of at least the 5 precepts, the better we can make more decisions that do good. Taking this into a bit of a different direction, there's AI for good. There is a concept that has popped up in different parts of the world that's governed by the concept of what you're talking about. And people are trying to use AI to do better things. So, for example, Google, being Google, they have their Google's DeepMind division, and they were able to simulate what's known as the AlphaFold complex modeling with the help of AI to come up with new medications for diseases that have not been able to solve for a very, very long time. So that was possible because of AI. And places where doctors, for example, are not able to be reached, then people can reach diagnosis quicker so that they can get the right medication. So there is also this other facet of AI of it can actually be beneficial. And it aligns with the precepts, it aligns with the betterment of humanity. What are your thoughts on that? And how do we is that the right direction?
I think that AI can be used as a tool. It needs to have the tool character. But the person operating and controlling the tool should be the human. That should never turn the other way around. That would be a dystopian scenario. So the CEO got to be human. And never mind if some of the workers, so to speak, this is a early application. So as long as the human intelligence, the HI, as this professor quoted, is on top of it, as long as the human being with his understanding of good and evil, with his qualities of empathy, of conscience, of loving kindness, is on top of the AI and is using that only as a tool, that is something that can be done. But sometimes a tool may take over.
Then we're in a movie.
That is a danger. So who is in charge? The other things, once we are on that, you should also look at AI has so much power. So who is controlling AI in terms of economic and ownership structures? And so I think that we need transparency there. And is that something so powerful? Do you just want to give that to a private owner? Some billionaire. Or even if it's not a billionaire, and often it is actually very opaque. Already when I studied economics business many years ago, this is owned by stockholders, and who are the majority stockholders, that may be another holding company, and then goes back to BlackRock or some big bank, and who owns them. Sometimes even difficult to figure out. So I think as humanity, we also have to make sure that it's not just one billionaire, one obscure anonymous company or shareholders being in charge of the AI, but that this is the people. But that we remain in charge.
I think that's where the challenge is, because the entire premise of power and money is centered around the bigger the monopoly, the more you will end up doing better, more success, essentially. But is that the kind of success that we actually need for humanity? I think that's the question to ask. But so if we take it back to a everyday person, one of the things that we always try to do is more important than ever before in the classroom for an everyday person to understand the terms and conditions of how these tools are governed. And I always recommend understanding which country owns them, because there's political implications, and where you're actually uploading information and where you're basically interacting with. So it's a difficult process, because people are already busy enough as it is, but now the accountability sits with them to know what this looks like. But I feel it's education and awareness, and it's one of the steps that ChatGPT said is actually something we can do to go towards that utopian future rather than a dystopia. What are your thoughts on how an everyday person should navigate this complexity? Because we can't get rid of AI unless the world goes dark one day. But how can they deal with it?
You see, if AI, if you want to use it as a tool and not as something that controls you, you are in control and use it as a tool. You have to first of all, you have to know what is actually your own values. What do you want to achieve in life? What is it that gives meaning to your life? For me, as a Buddhist monk, it's ultimately about striving to realize freedom, liberation, nibbana, what we call enlightenment. I understand this will be a small minority of humans, but for example, happiness. I think the most human will agree that they would prefer to be happy rather than unhappy. And I think most human beings will agree that they want a life that is meaningful. In the end, when they're at the end of their life and they look back, I don't think they will be satisfied just by how much money they have earned, but something more deeply meaningful. So I think every person has to first figure out what is actually really making me happy, me personally in my life, and also other people. What is it actually that gives really meaning to my life? If we don't know that, we wouldn't know really how to use it as AI as a tool to achieve it. But first we have to know what is actually that happiness and that meaning in my life that I want to achieve. And then the next step is, how can I use AI to support that? And when I look at a lot of the applications, does it actually make you more happy? Does it actually give you a feeling of that your life is more meaningful? And if you interact with a chatbot, what I'm reading, that many of these influencers, the people chat with them, and they honestly seem to think that an influencer with millions of followers and is chatting with them personally. How's it going to work? They're just chatting with a bot. And often you can't recognize that anymore. As we said, as the simulation of having a real human there. You may not recognize it, but is that something that you would feel happy? Would that give you meaning that you have interaction with a bot? On the other hand, if you look back and maybe you saved a human life. One person once told me how they did the first aid course CPR, And a short time later, at some event, someone had a heart attack, and he could apply that immediately, and it saved that person's life. And he told me how that was one of the most uplifting and meaningful events in his life so far. He had actually succeeded in saving another human being's life and made him very happy. Much more happy than getting a raise in his wages. So first we have to figure out what really gives us happiness, what kind of meaning do I want to achieve in my life. Once I have that sorted, then I can figure out in how far can AI actually help me to get there. Recently, one of the monks, he sent me via email one of these beautiful little kind of paintings, maybe scenes from the monastery. And I first saw that quickly on email, and I thought, wow, I didn't know he's such a little artist. I didn't know that about him. And I was really uplifted, and I thought, that's so wonderful that he is actually painting beautiful scenes in the monastery with a wallaby. And then a second thought occurred, could that be AI?
Yeah.
And I asked him, it turned out, not fully, and he used a photo, and then he gave some instruction, put a wallaby in, during the Anjali. But the scene of the moment I knew that, kind of,
Value's gone.
It didn't make me happy anymore.
It's interesting. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the way to almost navigate this complexity of all of these big issues happening in the world, the technology moving really fast, it's something that adds a lot of angst to teachers, students, workers, any context. Almost keeping up with AI is a very big task, and it adds a lot of feeling of left behind, feeling of their redundancy's gone almost, and the answer to the way I feel like you were presenting is actually looking inward, not looking outward. And the more clarity you have about where you stand, your purpose in life, and what's actually important to you, you can then almost come out of that and harness AI in a more productive sense for their betterment and their work or home or whatever context.
You got exactly my point. We have to first know what is really meaningful for us, what is real happiness for us, for humanity. If we haven't figured that one, then we don't know how to apply to AI to support it. If we have that clearly figured, then we can decide in how far is AI actually supporting it, and then use it for that. But if it is not supporting what leads to meaning and happiness in our life and humanity as a whole, then don't use AI. This is actually one hope I have, that people, as this simulation of humanity becomes more and more powerful, that we reevaluate the value of true human interaction like what we are doing. I'm 100% sure that I'm not interacting with AI now. Because we had to interrupt it, you had to go to the bathrooms. For example, you're a real human being with this messy human body, and this is valuable. Part of human being is also having this form, this body. And nowadays we have reached a stage that virtually everything on the screen, you cannot know anymore for sure what that is. I think the latest Google in video, for a few seconds, they can conjure up a scene with a completely conjectured person, and you may not be able to tell, is that a Google-generated scene or is it a real scene, even video. I think with audio we are definitely there. I think there's so much from me on podcasts where they could reproduce any text with my voice, including the German accent and everything. And even I wouldn't be able to tell whether I was doing that talk or whether it's AI generated. But my hope is in that situation that people then will reevaluate and they will have more human-to-human interaction again.
And I can see the ripple effect of that.
Because that means in the classroom, for example, students wouldn't, if they understand where they stand and they can understand how AI is going to do better, they will become that 5-10% of the cohort where students end up doing better work, higher performance, because they're elevating their human intelligence and leveraging AI versus using it to cheat or getting AI to do the work for them. And, we just have to look on the news very quickly and we'll see very big organizations making the same mistake. We've seen universities make the same mistake. I know teachers make the same mistake. I think humans end up making this mistake because it's easier, right? Because it makes that life a little bit less cumbersome and busy, and I don't have to put as much energy out so I can do other things. But if we don't use it, we lose it mentality, I think always needs to be governed in our head, and how are we using it, whether for the good or the bad, is very crucial. So I think that's a very good message to go by.
And I say something,
Yeah, for sure.
especially to teachers.
Absolutely.
Don't underestimate the value that you have as being a human being with consciousness, with a mind, and to have that direct interaction with the pupils. In the traditional training system we have as Buddhist monks, when you ordain, you must have a teacher. And it was designed to be like father-son. You need to have that very close human relationship. It includes the personal duties like washing the robes, putting out the seat for the teacher, carrying the bowl on arms round. Now, all these little duties which bring you close on the human level. And I think it's so important in the classroom. I would be disappointed if the teacher is just standing there and giving some guidance and then all the students on the computer interacting with AI. To preserve that human-to-human interaction in the classroom. Don't underestimate the value of that. It is also conduct. It's not only intellectual knowledge or data, but what ideally a teacher will do is presenting an example, someone to look up to, someone to respect for the student in their whole life, or at least in more than just someone who provides data.
Yeah.
And any teacher who only provides information and data to the student, he can obviously be replaced. AI can do that better.
Absolutely.
If I just want data, I don't need a human teacher. So it's so important to maintain this human interaction, because else it will be just replaced by AI.
Sure, because I think even the work that I'm doing myself is due to one of the best teachers that I had, and I owe a lot to him. It's because of that 30-second conversation that he's had in between that data. He's obviously teaching the classroom content, but it's that little, I understand you, I can see this value for yourself based on his experiences. Think about it. And I call it breadcrumbing, and I try to always teach with the same context of breadcrumbing of, why don't you have a look in that direction and explore and learn for yourself? I can see that it might benefit you. And he did exactly that, and he's still doing that in my life. So I think that's valuable advice. And this is something that I can see more and more prevalence needs and importance needs to be given to teachers in our society, just because of that value of shaping the future generations. So I think that's very valuable advice. Do you have any advice for the students?
Advice for the students, it's good to have some respect for teachers. And this is a basic interaction which we have in the Sangha, respecting the Buddha, respecting senior monks. As a Buddhist monk, now I have rules that I'm not allowed to teach the Dhamma to someone who acts disrespectfully. So if you had come and you wanted to conduct the interview by me sitting on the floor, and you're sitting on this big seat with a big backrest, I'm not allowed to teach Dhamma then, because you can't get anything across to someone who you don't respect. Once you respect someone, the teaching happens automatically. They start to automatically kind of copy their behavior and aspire to be more similar to them. That is crucial. But of course, you also need teachers who deserve respect.
Absolutely.
Same with parents, respecting parents, but the parents also have to make sure that they are worthy of respect.
Yes.
That is a crucial foundation of reflections for learning. I remember one gentleman who was helping probation, I think, when people come out of prison, and he was helping them in the probation period. And there was a young girl of Aboriginal background, and talking to her, she wanted to become a boilermaker. That was her dream and her aspiration. And he found it a bit unusual that for a young teenage girl who got into trouble, why does she want to be a boilermaker? What he found out in her whole family, whole extended family, there was so much dysfunctionality, drugs, criminality. But there was one person who had a real job, who was earning sufficient money, who could look after his family, who was a good father. That person happened to be a boilermaker. It wasn't really about the boilermaker, but what inspired her. That was one person who had got his life together. One person in her environment she could really look up to and respect. To find such a person in your life, someone you can look up to and respect, makes us actually happy if we have that. And it means that we can truly learn from that person. And I don't think AI can ever be that. We don't respect AI too much.
Good way of looking at it, because it's almost that simulation of regurgitation and what actually is worthy respect, and that connection is a very human element. And this actually reminded me of a couple of questions that you asked me almost 10 years ago that I think applies to this context. And it was a world before AI, but it's still relevant, I think, and in theme with what we're conversing now. You asked me, is the work I'm doing adding value, or is it having good ripple effects? Paraphrasing. And I could very easily answer that because I understood that very clearly for myself. Education is a whole different meaning to me and close to heart, mainly because of the teachers I've had in my life, the parents and whatnot. But then you asked me a second question, which took me about 6 months to actually properly gain clarity over. And you asked if I am losing myself running a business in it. So there was a lot of layers to that question. And it, at that point in asking that question, you did confuse me a little bit, and I wasn't sure how to answer that and grapple it. But over time, it kind of set in of this means I am, and again, looking inwards, the theme of today was, in this harsh realities, the busyness, the real response is looking inward. It started to set in a lot more clearly to understand this is how I am governing myself. So no, I am not putting on a facade, or it's not a mask. There is a clear intention behind certain actions. And this is why we're doing X, Y, Z versus A, B, C, etc. and so forth. So you've been a teacher to me as well. So I think it's I think wherever deems respect and value and where we can look up to, we will find a lot of good HI.
Thank you for the compliment, and I'm happy that I could do something beneficial for you if I ask questions.
Thank you. And is there anything else you'd like to share in the context of AI and Buddhism? Any message you'd like to give, or any closing remarks?
The real thing is inside. The AI is ultimately outside. You're just sending your mind outside. And all the deep answers and the profound happiness and ultimately also realization, freedom is by going inside into the heart. And when they promise you, they didn't touch on transhumanism yet, with implanting chips into the brain or uploading yourself into a supercomputer and all these things, whatever utopia they are promising you there, I doubt it will be a utopia, it may be a dystopia. But whatever they're promising you there, even if you assume it could be achieved, what you can find inside is even better. If we live a truly good life, if we make good karma, in the next rebirth, if you're reborn in a Devaloka, in one of the heavenly spheres, this will be much, much better and will continue for millions of years in human reckoning within any AI utopia. I think it's a misleading track to think that we can create a kind of Shangri-La and paradise here in the human world via AI. But you can create a Shangri-La, a paradise, and even higher than that in your own heart through meditation. And once you have created that in your own heart, this is where you will go after death, where your mind will go, where you will be reborn. And even beyond that, now that comes in many refined layers, and even beyond that, the true freedom from death and all suffering and all pain and all disappointment, a state of utter release, freedom, liberation. That can never be done in some AI, it can only be found in our heart, in our mind, in our consciousness. And it's so important that we look inside and that we don't allow AI and put our mind on the outside, bring it inside. All the answers, all the greatest happiness, freedom can be found inside, in that mind, in that consciousness, which we already all have. And you wouldn't need any AI for that. You only need Nama Rupa, body and mind. What you already have, you can sit down and connect and develop that clarity.
And we can do that even if AI becomes conscious one day.
Make it quickly.
In its definition.
Realize freedom before you get the plane ship.
I think so.
I guess it would be more difficult to meditate. I wouldn't put that thing into my brain.
Yeah, it's. I think if we go back to those same precepts, the internal clarification, then the answer to whether we should get that chip or not clarifies itself. So it's valuable advice.
It will not help you to realize that because that is not in the chip. No one can put you freedom, liberation, true happiness into your mind through a chip, but it's already there in your mind. It's very beautiful. And for example, samadhi is not something you have to create. It's a natural state of our mind, samadhi.
And sorry, samadhi is for people that aren't familiar.
Concentration, what is called concentration, the unification of the mind in bliss and rapture. And it's only our unskillful activity which is pulling the mind out, away from that. It's like the diamond is already there and you only have to remove the dirt. You don't have to break the diamond. And even a still higher state of total freedom, release, nibbana, even that one can be found in our heart, can be realized in our heart. And you don't need anything externally.
Very valuable advice. And honestly, I feel like we can talk for hours and hours, but very, I think, actionable steps as well as frameworks that we can start to govern on an everyday basis has been shared here today. So thank you so much. And thank you for doing what you do.
Don't become too much dependent on AI. First, it's convenient, then you become dependent. And then you become superfluous, you get substituted. And then you're in this kind of dystopia where AI is running things. The mind consciousness that we have, that should be in charge and running things. And then use AI only as a tool. And thank you so much for doing that and for getting the message out.
Thank you. HI over AI. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Now it's time to take action and build on the learnings to get inspired. First up, jump onto rashansenanayake.com/podcast and check out the show notes, links, and other relevant learning materials from this amazing episode. Next, if you learned something new today, click that subscribe button and set yourself up to receive live notifications on future episodes, as well as more opportunities to learn from our amazing guests, brands, and speakers. Last but not least, it's time to have your say. Join the conversation and share your thoughts and feedback on today's episode with a review, all while joining many others with a 5-star rating for Inspiring Design with Rashan Senanayake. Till next time.